I'm Joanna Kenty, and my new book, Cicero's Political Personae, has just come out with Cambridge University Press. It's a book about how the great Roman orator and lawyer Cicero played different characters or personae in his speeches to lay the groundwork for his arguments and maximize his leverage in persuading an audience or a jury. But as Cicero's role model Demosthenes once said, the three most important things about public speaking are delivery, delivery, and delivery. So I've decided to deliver dramatic readings of some of my favorite passages that I talk about in the book, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I think they're important. Chapter 3 deals with the persona of the orator as a martyr, and I'm actually not just talking about Cicero here. The word martyrdom we usually associate with Christianity, but the word itself comes from the ancient Greek for a witness, like a witness in the courtroom. We use it to mean bearing witness to one's principles, especially when it's taking a personal risk to do so. It's an act of self-sacrifice, which can be political or literal. It's very brave and admirable. And the act itself is usually doomed to fail, so there's something romantic, maybe even tragic, about this solitary, defiant figure of the martyr. The best example of this persona in the late Roman Republic is probably Cicero's contemporary, Cato the Younger. He was known for his integrity and his outspokenness, especially against Julius Caesar, and he often used the filibuster. He took a stand against Julius Caesar in the Civil War, and when he lost kind of the last stand in that civil war, he died by suicide rather than live under the rule of Caesar as a tyrant, or that's how his followers described it. Cicero sometimes takes on the role of the martyr in a political sense, claiming that he's sacrificing himself and taking risks on behalf of others, especially in his last speeches, the Philippics, delivered in 44 and 43 BCE. Cicero begins his second Philippic by saying, "Here we go again. For the last 20 years, anytime a bad guy wants to bring down the Republic, he starts by trying to hurt me. But it's fine." In this case, he's talking about one bad guy in particular, Mark Antony, who was the consul of 44 BCE, one of Julius Caesar's proteges. Cicero comes back to this theme of sacrificing himself at the end of his speech. So at the end of the second Philippic, Cicero says, "I would freely offer up my body if the city's freedom could be made possible through my death." You see, if I said 20 years ago in this very temple that death could not be premature when I'd already been consul, how much more truly will I say that now as an old man? So 20 years ago, it was Catiline going after Cicero and the Republic, at least in Cicero's version of the story. And I'll note here that the second Philippic was never actually delivered, so the "in this temple" phrase is kind of an imaginary setting. Cicero had said 20 years ago that if this was the time when he was destined to die, if Catiline was going to assassinate him, he had already achieved the highest office in the Roman Republic, so he would die satisfied. Now, 20 years later, he's over 60 years old, so he says he's even more satisfied with his fate if this is his time. He continues, "As far as I'm concerned, senators, I should actually wish for death, secure in the honors I've won and the things I've achieved. There are only two things I wish for now. First, that when I die, I leave behind a free Roman people. Nothing greater than this can be granted to me by the immortal gods. And second, that every man suffer the fate he has earned with his service to the Republic." There's a little bit of a threat against Antony in that last sentence. Cicero does plenty of attacking Antony in a very personal ad hominem way in this speech. But at the very beginning and here at the very end of the speech, he lays off the personal invective and takes on this stance instead as a martyr, which is more noble and heroic. He's playing the role of a freedom fighter rather than a personal enemy with a grudge. This might be really inspiring to his audience, and I think he's hoping they will want to take a heroic stance of opposition and defiance as well. I think this rhetoric is more powerful in 44 because of Cato the Younger and his death 2 years before this was written. Cicero doesn't exist in a vacuum here. He is playing on the emotions and the memories of his audience. And by the way, if you think that Cicero sounds like an American patriot at the time of the Revolution saying, "Give me liberty or give me death," you're right. Patrick Henry's speech in Virginia and Cicero's here have a common ancestor, the Philippics of Demosthenes, which was written in Greek in the 4th century BCE, but that's another PowerPoint. As a matter of fact, Cicero really did endanger himself by delivering these speeches, and he did become something of a martyr. Antony had him executed about a year later. Later orators hoped it had been worth it to speak out for freedom and bear witness to this principle. So that's a little bit about how Cicero uses his persona as a martyr, which is noble and heroic. In the next chapter, I talk about the opposite, how Cicero expresses fear and even makes a fool of himself sometimes, all in the name of persuading an audience.